Stanford University.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Andrew Holecek. I'm going to be leading this session, which I'll describe shortly. And perhaps for those of you who have been with us for the previous two talks, and those of you who haven't, we could start with perhaps my favorite of all meditations these days, one breath meditation session. I just love this thing. Taking a little sip of space to literally, for the duration of one inhalation, one exhalation, just simply bring your awareness to the full respiratory cycle. Fantastic. Meditation session completed for today. In our busy lives, oh, I don't have time to meditate. Well, do you have time to breathe? All you have to do is connect to this elixir of life and realize with literally one breath you can connect. I'm not making this practice up. It comes from the Mahamudra tradition. And since it is so delicious, let's do one more one breath meditation session. That's it. Second meditation session done for today. So those of you who may be just coming on in, I'm Andrew Holecek. I'll be guiding you through this breathtakingly beautiful, powerful practice of open awareness. I'm going to say a few introductory comments to situate it, create the right view behind it, and then we'll just jump right in and explore this extraordinary, really mind-bending, mind-opening practice. So the practice of open awareness is in a family of practices that are called non-referential meditations. And this subtlety is a little bit important for us because when we do most of our meditations, we're doing what are called referential meditations. And by this, what is meant when the mind strays from a reference point of body or breath or a candle or a mantra, you bring back that straying mind to that reference point. In this practice, we're going to remove the reference points. We're going to pull out the hitching post. And in the context of these death preparatory practices, this is a big deal. Because if you believe in this sort of thing, right now, during this life, we have a body, a breath, a candle, mantra, something to come back to. Well, in the after-death state, again, if this speaks to you, what do you come back to if there is no body and breath? You come back to awareness itself. So this kind of cultivates this industrial strength meditation, a capable, open mind that can rest upon whatever arises. Synonyms for this practice are called also objectless shamatha. Shamatha is the Sanskrit word for tranquility or peace. Shamatha without a sign, non-referential mindfulness, formless meditation, awareness of awareness. And then the scientists use this term open monitoring. But I like the practice of open awareness because it's resonant with my favorite definition of meditation, which is indeed habituation to openness. So what this practice allows us to do, instead of constantly closing down, contracting, becoming increasingly habituated to contraction, open awareness, just like the one breath meditation, allows us to reverse this habit and default into opening. And both openness and contraction, again, these are things we can feel. We can feel what it's like to contract. We can feel what it's like to open. And so in the spirit of transforming obstacle into opportunity, what this practice does, it creates an exquisite new contrast medium of openness, background, canvas, that allows us to better discern how often we contract. And therefore, whenever we feel the contraction, we can flip it in an alchemical tantric way on the spot into openness. So as you'll see, this practice is a multivalent practice, which means it has many levels, applications, and depths. Depending on your interests, you can keep it at relatively entry levels, receive profound benefits, or you can go to the deep end of the pool, where this practice will lead you into the nature of mind itself. So as I talked about in my previous two riffs, one of the biggest problems is we are in fact too familiar, too habituated to contraction, distraction, grasping, virtually all synonyms. It's our default practice. It's just where we go. We're not enough familiar with openness. And so therefore, at first, this practice can feel a tad bit unfamiliar simply because we're not familiar with it. We're habituated not to openness, but to contraction. So the great gift of this practice is, among many things, if contraction, as I've argued, is indeed the source of all our suffering, contraction, grasping, distraction, well, openness is therefore the key to our liberation. So when I talk about this notion of creating a new contrast medium that allows us to discern all our contractions, well, it's a partial truth. Because if the contraction is extraordinarily subtle, if it's ubiquitous, if it's constant, we lose touch with it. It's like an air conditioning system that's been running. You don't even know it's on until it turns off. And it is, in fact, in these instances when the contraction turns off that we have so-called spiritual experiences. This is a big deal. Look behind any spiritual experience you have ever had, and I promise you, underneath it, you will feel a quality of openness. So the practice of open awareness allows you to cultivate a spiritual experience all the time. So what we're going to do with this practice, layer by layer, contraction upon contraction, we're going to work our way down to what? The primordial contraction. We're going to work our way down to nothing, to empty open space itself. And so what we'll discover with this practice at fruitional levels is that this primordial contraction that we talked about, this fundamental sense of me-ness, the primordial contraction feels like me, I, and mine. The primordial contraction is grasping onto nothing, and all the secondary, tertiary, quaternary contractions that comprise the entirety of our lives are grasping after nothing. And so therefore, this practice reveals both of these, the internal openness or emptiness of our being and the external openness and emptiness of reality itself. So what we're doing is we're bringing fundamentally these unconscious processes into the light of consciousness so that we can relate to the contraction instead of from it. We can relate to it instead of from it. Relating from it is no relationship at all. That's the default. Relating to it is what allows us to transform it. So by touching into these really kind of entry-level gross contractions, working our way down to these super subtle contractions, this is profoundly liberating because even though it's subtle, subtle doesn't mean ineffectual. All the things we do in our gross lives are dictated by very subtle processes, and that's what we're trying to bring into light. So with this said, I'm going to recommend that you turn away from the screen. I'm going to be obviously facing the screen, but turn towards there. You have some space in your room. If you can still hear me and actually even look out a window, that's fantastic. But the idea is to turn away from the screen of the computer. And even though we're going to start with our eyes closed, just for purposes of contrast, an open, spacious arena is the most conducive to this practice. So go ahead at first, go ahead and close your eyes. And just for a minute or two, do your regular mindfulness meditation, your regular shamatha, whatever your normal practice of settledness, gatheredness, and quiescence might be. The practice of open awareness is so subtle, so nuanced, so refined that if we don't slow the mind down just a wee bit, the untamed, untrained mind will stampede over this practice. If you're wearing glasses, I also invite you to remove your glasses, set them aside, and at a point that will vary from person to person, and even for you, day to day, depending on the speediness of your mind, the mind feels somewhat settled, somewhat gathered. You don't have to enter a deep meditative absorption or samadhi or jhana state. The mind just has to be slightly settled. We can make this transition from referential practice that has brought us back to breath, to body, to mantra, to whatever. We can slowly pull out the hitching post. And the invitation here on both ends actually is to notice without judgment what you feel. Does the following transition feel refreshing, liberating, opening, or does it feel intimidating, daunting even? Remember Swami Kripalu, the highest form of spiritual practice is self-observation without judgment. So don't judge, just observe, just notice. Notice what you feel. So when the mind is slightly gathered, centered, slowly, gently, open your eyes and keep your gaze down. Then ever so slowly, raise your gaze until you are looking straight ahead. Open your visual field by focusing, quote unquote, on the periphery. We're going to invite an openness of the mind's eye by opening and expanding the physical eye. Relax your jaw, let it drop open. Release the reference points of body and breath or mantra, whatever you are using. Pull out the hitching post. And mix your mind with space. Open. Open. In the Dzogchen tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, they refer to space awareness. That what we know as physical space, so to speak, is not the same as the inner space of the mind, but neither is it different. So we engage outer space to invoke inner spaciousness. If your mind, your attention is drawn to some sensory input, allow it to alight upon whatever arises. Let's say, for example, you hear the sound of a barking dog. Allow your awareness to briefly alight upon that sound. The practice is to notice the tendency to contract around that sound and to proliferate into conceptual commentary. Why can't my neighbor control his dog? That reminds me, I need to take my dog to the vet. Why are vets so expensive these days? When that inevitable mental commentary arises, you rest your mind on that. Your thoughts then become the next object of your meditation. Open, relax. Mix your mind with space. In the previous practice of referential mindfulness, you could indeed be distracted. In this practice, distraction becomes your meditation. Nothing can interrupt this practice because interruption becomes your practice. Open awareness cultivates an indestructible industrial strength meditation because, like space itself, mind awareness, when it's this open, becomes indestructible. Space has remarkable qualities. On one level, it's the softest thing in the universe. There's nothing softer than space. But on another level, there's nothing more indestructible. You cannot bomb space, burn it, cut it. Nothing can land on space. Let's say your mind is then drawn to a physical sensation in your body. Allow your mind to briefly alight upon that. It simply doesn't matter what arises or what happens. This practice, like space itself, allows you to accommodate, receive anything. How big can you make your mind? Towards the end of his beautiful long life, after teaching for 70 years, the great sage Krishnamurti was once asked, "What's the secret to your happiness, to your unflappable contentment?" He replied, "I don't mind what happens." This is the practice of I don't mind what happens. The practice of unconditional happiness. At first, because this practice invites such spaciousness, the untamed mind, the near enemy for the untamed mind of spaciousness is spaciness. If you notice that you're zoning out, spacing out, you can temporarily just drop the entire practice. Literally, briefly close your eyes, almost shake and move your body around. Reinvigorate the somatic system, and then simply reinstate the practice. Hit the refresh button. The notion of fresh start. Just look ahead, start again. At first, when the mind gets this open and silent, we tend to associate this openness with a quality of sleep. Open awareness is very crisp, precise. And as a refinement, perhaps notice quality of openness, expansion that may be taking place in your body and in your heart. In both Sanskrit and Pali, the same word, chitta, is used for both mind and heart. So by opening one's mind, one is opening one's heart and one's entire body. Allow your entire being to expand, open to the limits of the cosmos. Precisely the grand opening that occurs at death. So the practice is to allow the mind to briefly, gently alight upon whatever arises. Making whatever arises at the mental or sensorial world become your meditation. And to refine this practice in the context of the previous presentations, perhaps notice that when the mind alights upon a thought or something, some sensory input, there invariably tends to be a very subtle contraction. We can feel this contraction and know that it's taking place when we have this sense that there's something out there even if it's the level of thought, that results in this sensation, I'm experiencing that. The following revelations may not occur initially, but as your practice refines, as you become more familiar with the spacious quality of your mind and heart, you will make a set of remarkable, extremely subtle discoveries. When the mind alights upon a sensorial arising, it very subtly contracts and thereby solidifies, reifies whatever that arising might be. Let's say it was the sound of the dog. You label it dog, you label it sound. You've contracted into concept. The exquisite revelation takes place, as we discussed in our last presentation, when this one contraction gives birth to twins. At lightning fast speeds that we can start to see when we open and slow to such an extent, we will discover these ongoing contractions that give birth to the illusion of self and other, inside and outside, duality itself. which results in the ongoing illusion that I'm experiencing that. But you're not. I am that. This practice, as the awareness, will eventually reveal to you exactly what we explored in our contemplations, that the only thing that ever arises is awareness itself. Hard stop. You can open to such a degree that this becomes your direct experience. This practice then becomes profoundly liberating because you will come to prefer awareness itself over any external object because you will see there is no external and there are no objects. There's only awareness. Exactly what's revealed when the primordial contraction of the self-sense dissolves either at the moment of death or in deep meditation. This is venturing into the deep end of the open awareness pool. As we start to work our way back into form, to reincarnate back into form, notice again how this transition feels. Does it feel comforting, securing, consoling? Or does it feel claustrophobic, entrapping? Just notice. Centralize your gaze by looking directly ahead. Close your mouth. Slowly lower your gaze. Close your eyes. And return to body and breath, or whatever reference point you were engaging in your previous referential meditation. But perhaps notice how this practice of open awareness perfumes your previous practice. Notice perhaps how your body feels more open lighter, expansive. And perhaps most importantly, notice what you feel in your heart center. This practice of openness is simultaneously the practice of emptiness. And emptiness is just a funny Buddhist way of talking about love. We saw that the primordial contraction feels like the self sense. The primordial openness feels like love. This really is the practice of unconditional love, and it will show you, when brought to fruition, how to fall in love with your world. I can think of no more elegant way to finish my series of presentations on that note, that everything we've been talking about over these presentations has been irreducibly about learning how to love. So the deepest sense of gratitude to Stanford, the extraordinary energy of Tia and her team. It's been really such a deep honor and delight for me to spend time with you. And perhaps some of these practices will register in your being as you recall, remember the delights of mixing, opening, sipping, or in this case, drinking in space, and the love that's brought to you and then to others through this practice. So thank you so very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Andrew. We are grateful.